Good morning, how are you today? My name's Linda and we're coming live to you from beautiful Brisbane, Australia, where we're doing baked Australians at the moment, not frozen like the Northern Hemisphere. We're doing hot summer. If you're here this morning, remember to say g'day and welcome. It's great to have you with me. And if you're here for the replay, do a hashtag replay later on. Today, I'd like to talk with you about emotional regulation and self-soothing, because self-soothing can be a really super important part of helping us when our emotions do become dysregulated. Feel welcome to ask questions at any time, and by the time we get to the end, I want to give you some questions too that you can reflect upon and ask what's happening for you. Because remember, with complex PTSD, it's different for each of us. We're going through different stages of recovery, compared to each other. And g'day, and because of the complexity, we're going to find different things work for different people. So it's really important that you take notes and use them either to remind yourself of whatever it is that you next want to look at for yourself and how it applies in your day-to-day life, or you want to take it to your therapist or trauma coach and work with a greater understanding of it for you. And that's why I do these videos, because it's important that you have information so that your recovery isn't taking as long as what it did for all of us before we had this information. I love the information that we've got now, and it is all relatively new. So if you have a therapist who doesn't know about all of this stuff, there is plenty of information out there now. And a lot of therapists don't know about it just yet because they do have a lot on their plate. And keeping up with all the latest and greatest isn't the easiest thing to do. However, for us, we can keep up with the latest information and we can use it in our recovery journey. Okay, so when we've got emotional dysregulation, it's the period of time before we go into hypoarousal or hyperarousal. I talk more about hypoarousal because that's what I personally experienced. And so when we look at the stage where we feel overwhelmed, okay, and where we know we want to do something in our day-to-day life, but we can't get there because the overwhelm's happening, that's when we want to look at apologies, battling a wee little bit of the flu. We want to look at self-soothing techniques in order that we can teach our brain and our body that as an adult we are able to overcome the overwhelm and feel safe. Okay? When we feel safe, and we can let our brain know that we can feel safe, it actually starts to reduce when we're triggered. Actually, I meant to bring a bottle with me. And one of the things that we can do is, let me just grab this bottle for you because I want to give you a visual. Okay. I thought of this last night for you. Now, in our amygdala, okay, which is part of our limbic system and where we process things, we have, the hypo and hyper, I've done another video on, but I will explain it after I explain this. I'll put up an infographic for you. Okay, so see all the glitter in here? I wanted to give you a visual of what it's like inside our amygdala, which is swollen from childhood adverse experiences, okay? In it are all little bits, obviously smaller than the glitter, and they're like that. They just float around in the amygdala, And it's all the unresolved stuff that our brain, not us personally, but our brain hasn't been able to file away into the hippocampus, okay? And when we're out and one of our senses, attaches to one of the little pieces floating around in our amygdala, we go into, for me, it was definitely into overwhelm and then down into anxiety, shut down. And when I began to understand that it was because my sensory system had perceived a threat, and obviously had been sitting there for decades, then I was going to have a panic attack, an anxiety attack, literally. So, when you start perspiring and you feel all tight in your chest and you're going, I know I'm having an anxiety attack and I have no idea why. That's when one of these little pieces floating around in the amygdala that's the trigger, okay? So one of the things that we can do to self-soothe in that situation is to use the affirmation, I am safe, and look around where you are. And for me, it often happened at gym when I was doing the same thing the same day again. And that's how it can be. It's just random. So I learned to say, I am safe, but I would also use my breath. Using your breath when this happens, when you get triggered, is super, super important to slow it down and feel your breath and repeat, I am safe. And it's very soothing to know that as an adult I do this so that I can teach my body and brain that I don't have to go into fight, flight, freeze or fawn and run off or be panicked because I can't move or frozen, and on it goes. So that's one thing we can do to self-soothe. Oh, we're going to have fun with this morning. Another thing I'm learning to do as well is when the overwhelm comes is to recognise it and to sit down. I did this the other day. I sat down and I went, okay, I've been triggered, don't know why, I'm at home. Let's sit down, and I just imagined each emotion that was attached to the overwhelm rising up inside of me, and I just went like bubbles, okay? And I went, okay, what's that emotion feel like? Give it a name. I went, oh, that was just like my inner child saying, oh, I don't know what to do. So I said, this is manageable. And as I did this, I actually felt really good. I went, oh, awesome, I'll do this again. So as we break down each emotion, as in, not go into it and analyse it, but go, right, let's separate the overwhelm into one emotion at a time, I found it became easier and it affected my whole internal system. And I went, oh, this is great. I feel good because I'm sitting down and identifying what's happening for me instead of allowing the overwhelm to shut my whole system down. And it does shut our whole system down. The neurobiology, the chemistry of it all is that all the adrenaline goes to our extremes so that we're getting ready to, go into fight, flight, freeze mode and keep us safe, right? So it's a habit, and there's a reason for it as well, for the habit. But at the moment, we need to be able to sit down and go, right, the overwhelm is happening. I don't want to go into hyperarousal, which means that everything's gone to the extreme and I lose time. I want to grab my emotions when they're starting to dysregulate. I want to recognise it and I want to sit down and work with them. So not against them, not to analyse them, but to work with them as to what my body is saying is coming up at this point in time. Okay? I'll just grab the infographic for the hypoarousal because it is important. Okay? And I will put this infographic up at the end as well. I think I tried to get it bigger once before. Okay, so the quickest explanation, simplest, is we have a window of tolerance, and this allows us to live in our day-to-day life of what we can tolerate, what we feel comfortable with. And the other side of this too is our window of tolerance also contains where we feel comfortable and where it's not that we avoid our triggers, but we know things that have triggered us in the past. So we go back to our window of tolerance, and it's like we add to the list, right? I don't want to do that again because I got triggered. And that's not a healthy thing to do, because we don't know that we'll get triggered with the same thing repeatedly. Some things, yes, but not all the time. It's never going to be the same reason, and we may never know the reason that we triggered, but we can use the tools to self-soothe and overcome and manage to get back into regulation. So just if you can just bear with me a sec, I want to make this larger, if it'll let me. Alright, it's not going to let me, so I'm just going to bring it up on my computer so I can read it out to you. Okay, so in here, this is in our day-to-day life. This is where things feel just right, where you are best able to cope with the punches life throws at you. You're calm but not tired. You're alert but not anxious. So you're aware of your environment, you're aware of what's going around, and you're okay with it, all right? The dysregulation, and this is for both sides of the window of tolerance, this is when you begin to feel like you're shutting down. You may feel a little spacey, lose track of time, or start to feel sluggish. You don't feel out of control, but you also don't feel comfortable. So to put it in terms of our day-to-day life, you can begin to recognise dysregulation through being aware of when you want to do something in your day-to-day life, but you can't actually get there. One of the things that I became aware of is when I wanted to do things, this is last year I think, I wanted to get up and go to gym. So I'd be like, right, let's go. I'd get dressed for gym, and then the next thing you know, I'm sitting in the lounge chair and I can't move. I literally can't move, and my head felt so heavy, and I'm sitting there and I'm going, why can't I move my body? I want to do this. This is my choice. And I had no idea about dysregulation at the time. Zero, zip, nada, nothing. No information to understand that, because at the time my brain perceived that I was doing something new. Okay, so I was pushing through and above and beyond what my brain had become comfortable with. It would send out like, we better start shutting down. Okay, it had been triggered, and I didn't know that this is what was happening in my brain. So it's not my fault. I wanted to get up and do things, but my brain was like, oh yeah, no, that's out of the comfort zone. So think of your window of tolerance as your daily comfort zone, and think of recovery as me recognising my daily comfort zone and being prepared to work with myself and expand that comfort zone, okay? Now, when we expand our comfort zone, we do, without even meaning to, our brain will go into dysregulation because it's afraid. It triggers the basic mechanism that's in our brain from the childhood trauma, which is fear. Okay? We have to be willing to pick up the pieces and work with the fear, not against it. So there's no use saying to ourselves, oh, I shouldn't be afraid, let's just get up and get on with it. I've since learned that to do that to ourselves is to bully ourselves, and that's not going to help, because that's just going to trigger us, and it's like repeating the trauma. So we need to be able to sit down and work out, how can I self-regulate my emotions? What am I going to do to feel comfortable? So working with our internal system, not working externally. So not looking at what I should be doing according to the, the world outside, but working with my internal system in order that I can build up my resilience to be able to take another step forward. So for me, just taking that one example, being able to take another step forward, I went and said to a guy at Nutrition Warehouse, I said to him, look, I need something that will help me. And I had no idea any of this was happening. I just wanted something that could help me get up off the lounge. And I actually, he gave me a product which I continue to use to help make my heart rate increase, which allows me to get out of the dysregulation, but it also allows me to do another important thing, which is good for self-soothing, is increasing our oxygen flow into our body. So whether you do that because you're sitting at home in a lounge chair and you're going to move your body in one way for 1 minute, and that gets more oxygen in, and we've got to have more oxygen, all right? It's scientifically proven that as we increase our oxygen, it helps us recover. Just one of the things. So what this product allowed me to do was get up off the lounge chair and get to gym. And now my brain goes, all right, we're going to gym, no worries. It's not even a second thought. And when I'm down at gym, it helps me. See, I go to gym and work on my breath. So you can work on your breath even in bed, okay? 5 seconds in and 5 seconds out. And it really does help you, even if you do 5 seconds in and 5 seconds out, 1 minute a day, you'll begin to notice the difference because you've increased the amount of oxygen coming into your body. Okay, now the hypoarousal is when we move from the dysregulation, and this happens when we don't even know, one, about dysregulation, and two, we aren't aware that it's happening and it will increase. And I'll just read this to you. This is when you feel extremely zoned out, and I can't read that word, sorry. So let's say both emotionally and physically. Numb. That's right. So this is when you feel extremely zoned out and numb. And if you're a mum, you'll notice this because one of the kids comes along and starts talking to you and you realise that you're not even in the same space as them. You're like, what? Can you repeat that? What did you say? And you realise that you're not even taking on board. Like, imagine your kid comes to you and they're super excited and they're going, and when you've entered hypoarousal, you're like, it's like you sit there and do you remember when we used to start cars with a key and if they're an older car, it'd take time to turn the motor over, and you'd turn the key and push the accelerator. Well, when you're numb, when you're in hypoarousal, it's like trying to turn the key and push the accelerator and nothing's happening. So the motor's half starting. So someone will be there talking to you and it's like you know that you're not connecting with them and you're not connecting with what they're saying, and you become very aware, and this is when hypoarousal is happening. Okay? And it's a really good thing to know, because if we don't know that this is what's happening, how are we going to address it? How are we going to work through emotional regulation and self-soothing techniques if we don't know that we've gone from dysregulation into hypoarousal or hyperarousal? And also in hypoarousal, time can go missing. It might feel like you're completely frozen, okay? It's not something you choose. Your body literally takes over, and your brain, it's the reaction in your brain and which tells your body what to do, right? So it's not something that you've got control over that happens, but it's something we definitely can work towards recognizing in order that we put strategies into place and go, right, this isn't my fault that I'm sitting here in this lounge chair for 2 hours and I've lost time. But what I can do is go, okay, I want this to happen less and less and less. So one of the big things I came to realise recently was when this was happening, all my work would go off track for days at a time. So I'd do everything in my diary, but all the extra stuff that I want to do, I couldn't get to because I was in hyperarousal and hadn't realised it, okay? But as I've come to realise that one of the things that I do, which does help with self-soothing as well, is keep track of time. So keep track of what I've got to do in my day, what time I've got to do it, and I'm still working towards putting a nighttime timed brackets in order that when we do this, or when I do this, when I've got time set down, I can recognise whether I'm dysregulating and avoiding, not avoiding intentionally, but I'm not able to get to the things I want to do. So just say, for argument's sake, your nighttime routine has to include doing the dishes, having a shower, getting ready for the next day. Just those 3 simple things, if they're not happening for me, I know that I need to work with either the dysregulation box or the hyperarousal box. And the hyperarousal box is, so you've gone from dysregulation, okay? Dysregulation for hyperarousal, this is when you begin to feel agitated and you may feel anxious, revved up, or angry. You don't feel out of control, but you don't feel comfortable. And then when your emotions go from dysregulation into hyperarousal, well, your whole brain and body, this is when you feel extremely anxious, angry, or even out of control. Unfamiliar or threatening feelings can overwhelm you and you might want to fight or run away. Okay? So there's been a lot written about hyperarousal. It was the more known and more common, more aware of the two. And the hyperarousal has been less known. Okay? So when I came across all the information for hyperarousal, I went, oh, finally something makes sense as to, why I lose chunks of time, why I wasn't able to get to the work that I wanted to do. And I really love the work. I really love being able to come and share the information, because once we understand that these things are happening at a brain level because of how our brain formed, it's like, oh my goodness, I just need to have consistency and commitment and courage to work with this. And I begin to reclaim my life. I can begin to understand that not all the emotions that are happening are about now. They're about what happened in the past. I don't want to revisit the past because it's obviously already still happening in my body. What I want to do is change things up so that as I do it with commitment and consistency, I rewire my brain. So remember our neuroplasticity? So each time that we sit down and pay attention to all the things that we've talked about this morning, it enables our brain to start forming new neural pathways, and that's how we stop going down and being triggered repeatedly. As we create these new neural pathways with new behaviour, honouring how we're feeling and saying, look, I'm the adult now, I'm safe. Doing things like addressing our inner child, what we need, so meeting our needs now as an adult, right? These things all help with emotional regulation. They get us back on board, back online in life far quicker than if we ignore all this information. Now, one of the things that I've noticed is what we call working from the bottom up. in the brain is that when I work with the triggers and I do the whole I'm safe, that's worked really well. But then as I did that, I began to be able to develop a deeper awareness of when the fear, before the trigger happened and when fear was happening. And as we develop that deeper internal awareness, we're able to stop going offline as often as well. I hope that's helped. I don't want to give you too much information to overwhelm you, but certainly understand that our brain formed with a fear response, okay, understandably, and people who haven't experienced trauma, when something new comes into their life, and look, for us, it can be as simple as our kids coming to us, and mine are adults now, and saying, oh, Mum, I need to do this, what do you think about this? And when you're sitting here and you're focused on what you're doing in your work, and they come along and introduce something new into the day, it's like, what? Can you say that again? And meanwhile, without us even being conscious of it, our brain's having a fear response. Because we learn as children, our brain learned in its pathways that things are unmanageable, that they're overwhelming. People who haven't experienced trauma, when somebody comes along with a new idea or wants information, their first response at a brain level is, this is manageable. When I learnt that, it was like, oh my goodness. I walk around now in my mind and I'm saying, when things crop up, I am now training my brain to go, this is manageable. Let's break it down. Okay? And this is how we combat that fear response that happens automatically, that we haven't been aware of, and until now, science hasn't had the information for us. So now that we're aware, we can begin to break it down and go, this is manageable. And saying this is manageable is actually another self-soothing technique for us, because we want to rewire our brain that no matter what comes along as an adult, this is manageable. Okay? I hope this has helped. For today, sit down and with your note, paper and pen and say, where do I feel overwhelmed? And the other question is, where do I feel things haven't been manageable? So where is the fear overriding my normal adult response of life's manageable into its feeling like everything is unmanageable? Okay? Feel welcome to let me know how you go, and have a gorgeous day. If you're in the Southern Hemisphere, try and stay cool. If you're in the Northern Hemisphere, try and stay warm. And I'll be back with another episode tomorrow and more information. And take some time. Take some time to write down the things that you can observe already for yourself. And I will put the hypo-arousal infographic underneath this as well in the comments section, so that you can really take it on board and remind yourself that this isn't your fault this happened. Your brain developed differently, and now that I understand, I can work with it increasingly in a more and more or a greater, healthier way, in order that I can reclaim my life. Okay, blessings and dreams, and I'll catch you again tomorrow. Bye for now.